Good morning, I'm Alda Donahue, President of the New West Symphony League. Welcome to Meet the Artists. Today we're featuring our concertmaster Danielle Belen, who will be our soloist this weekend, and also our guest conductor Stephen Mercurio. Join me in welcoming them.
I come to this. That's my usual position is this way. A lot of times I meet people and they don't recognize me, even after a concert, because they say, oh, was that you? That was you? I said, how about now? You recognize me? They go, oh, that's perfect. Now I see. So now I get to see you face to face.
We're so happy to be here today. Thank you all for coming. And I couldn't be more thrilled to be the soloist this weekend for my orchestra that I love here, and for all of you, and so many familiar faces here, and friends, and
yes,
really
and
looking forward.
To come out to California. I'm a New Yorker, in case you couldn't tell. Just in case you couldn't tell. But I have a long association already with the New West Symphony. As many of you know, I did a lot of the Bocelli concerts here on the coast, and I've started with them, I think, 98, 99, and I've used them for many, many, many of these concerts. So when I was asked to do a so-called serious concert, I was thrilled to do it. And so we have Brahms, Vaughan Williams, and of course the Mendelssohn Violin Concerto, which I'm sure you've been around the block a few times with Mendelssohn.
I do know Mendelssohn.
Personally?
I
don't
feel
look
like
that old.
like,
you know Mendelssohn personally?
I feel like I do.
Well, he was your age. I'm guessing your age. Because, you know, we had this conversation sort of already. Because she's too young and too pretty to be a concert mistress, right? When I think of concert mistress, I think of some old guy sitting there like this, yelling at the section. But she's so talented and so beautiful that the orchestra's lucky to have you at the tender age of...
Almost 30.
Almost 30. It's interesting because Mendelssohn wrote the concerto. He started to write the concerto when he was 31 and finished it when he was 35, 36. So it's very, very appropriate that a young virtuoso would handle this piece, not necessarily our imagination of some Heifetz-like older male doing it, but that Mendelssohn and his sister.
Well, hopefully we're not too similar, because I think he died about 4 years later after he wrote this piece.
Well, it wasn't from playing the violin concerto.
He did die young, and he, of course, he was one of the child prodigies, like Mozart.
Were you a child prodigy?
No, I was not.
You weren't one of those annoying child prodigies that we all had.
I
could see you in a little tiny dress with the shoes, and your parents are dressing you up, and they're saying, play! Play! Every family get together.
You know,
did they throw you out and force you to
I have many students like this, but I myself was not. Like my parents are not musicians. They started me. I went to a Montessori school, and in Montessori schools they have group violin lessons. And I did start when I was young. I started when I was 5.
So this is even before the Suzuki so-called method. You already went to a school that allowed you to start at a very young age.
No, this was part of it. It was a Suzuki-based program. Okay. I think that's been going on
for quite a while,
for a really long time. But it was group lessons. I certainly was not practicing every day when I was young. And
well, what were you doing?
Being a kid, I guess. I guess I was being a kid. And, for many years, I actually wanted to be an artist. I would draw cartoons, and I wasn't on the path to be a violinist until I was 15, 16 is when I started getting, that was the age that I started practicing 4 hours a day and started,
because you wanted to, not because they told you to do it.
Exactly. And, I was the kid, oh man, my mom would ask me. My parents would never tell me to do anything. They would ask me, do you want to play at Christmas? And I would say, absolutely not. No, I don't want to play at Christmas for all my cousins. They're going to make fun of me and da-da-da. So I was not really like put out there on display or
That's why you're so wonderfully well adjusted.
Maybe.
A lot of the child prodigies are forced into it, and they're sent. And same thing in sports. You find some of the young gymnasts, and they don't develop as a three-dimensional human being. And it's so much better, in my opinion, to approach these pieces as a well-developed child or young adult, and then you're discovering it as opposed to being told this is great music, sit and play. You know?
I had a wonderful teacher when I was a teenager who really ignited a passion for music. And the emphasis was really on repertoire and learning to love violin repertoire. You know, when I look back, sometimes I wish I had had more emphasis on technique when I was younger, because I was a little bit of a late bloomer, you know, as far as it wasn't really until, like I said, late high school and college when I started really refining my skills and doing things that maybe I should have done when I was younger, but I did have this passion for it. So it wasn't...
Self-discovery is definitely the way to go.
It was definitely self-discovery.
So what school did you go to? I mean, because from a teenager, you don't somehow end up in a conservatory or a major university.
Right. Well, I went to the University of Southern California.
Multiple times.
Yes, I did my undergraduate degree there, and I studied with... you know, it just was a really great turn of events, the way that things happened. I really wasn't planned. My parents didn't push me, but I ended up studying with Robert Lipset, who, at first, actually, I studied with his assistant for the first year, Elizabeth Pitcairn, who used to be our concertmaster. And so I studied with Liz for the first year, and she straightened me out. I had all kinds of problems. They saw potential, but there were all kinds of problems. I studied with Mr. Lipset after that, and then when I graduated from USC, I went to the Colburn Conservatory, and I was there for 3 years as a professional studies student.
What does that mean, professional studies?
Well, at the time they didn't have a master's degree, so they had certificates. And professional studies was a program where I was not taking academic classes. It was all music. So it was, you know, I was taking, of course, my private lessons. That's really the bread and butter of everything, your studies with your teacher. And Robert Lipset was such a huge influence on me, and still is to this day.
So he's your major mentor.
Absolutely, and he's, you know, if I could talk for hours about Mr. Lipset,
go ahead.
but he started out as this. If any of you have ever seen Mr. Lipset, he's, let's just say, the last thing you think he would do for a living is teach the violin. He's a man of great stature, and looks like he might be a football coach rather than, but. He's an incredible person, and in many ways has been sort of an additional father figure for me, and a mentor. And he's the one that saw a spark in me for teaching, and gave me opportunities to work with some of his younger prodigies and work with them on technique. And that started while I was in the Colburn Conservatory, pursuing this professional studies degree, and also playing in the New West Symphony. So that was my professional work at the time, was playing in the New West Symphony as assistant concertmaster, and doing some teaching with Mr. Lipset, which gradually turned into more and more, and I developed my own studio of about, at that time it was about 6 kids or so, and I just put my whole heart and soul into them. And a couple of them actually have gone on to study at Indiana University and Manhattan School of Music and
When did
UCLA.
your solo career start to take off?
The big thing that was a turning point with my solo career was the Sphinx competition in 2008.
What is that?
The Sphinx competition is held in Detroit, Michigan, and it's a competition for African American and Latino string players. And if you don't know my background, I'm half Mexican, and so I qualified to do this competition, and it was life-changing. I won in 2008, as I said, and...
What did you play?
For the competition?
Yeah.
I actually played that Wieniawski Polonaise, and this piece by African-American composer William Grant Still called Mother and Child, which has kind of become very dear to me since then.
And he was a Detroit native as well.
Was he?
Yeah.
I think so.
Because I do the opera every year in Detroit, and one of his relatives actually sings in the chorus, and she made sure that I knew that he spent some time.
He's a wonderful composer.
So that's probably why that worked out for that competition.
Yeah.
That's terrific.
And Aaron Dworkin, who's the founder of Sphinx, he's won the MacArthur Grant. He's a genius. He developed this organization beyond all of our wildest dreams, and has all kinds of partnerships with every major orchestra. Boston. Within a month of winning the competition, I was asked to solo with the Boston Pops, the Cleveland Orchestra, Pittsburgh Symphony, San Francisco Symphony, Colorado Symphony, Nashville Symphony. I got to play a little recital in Carnegie Hall, and I got a CD contract to record a CD for Naxos. So, I call this competition the home run competition. It
set you above.
It did, and I absolutely loved the experience of going and touring and playing with these orchestras, and it gave me a completely heightened perspective on the kind of goals and the kind of teaching I want to do for my students who
Well, what
wish
made
those
you
things for
decide then
themselves.
to decide or to attempt to be the concert master or mistress of this orchestra? What do you prefer, concert master?
I like concert master. I don't want to be.
You don't want to be
have a
anyone's
special
mistress?
girl.
There's something a little
there's
risque
something
about
a
being
little.
called a concert mistress.
There is. There's something a little weird
There's
with the mistress.
a little weird about that.
I don't like the mistress. But
What made you decide that, okay, I've had the solo career, I've played with the Pittsburgh Symphony and Boston and Detroit or whatever it is, but to say, I'm going to come back home and live here and do that with the New West Symphony? Because
Right.
we're not even talking about the LA Phil, we're talking about the New West Symphony.
Right. But first of all, we have a wonderful symphony, as you know.
That's an understatement.
And
We'll get to that.
Yes, I know. And for me to play concertmaster is a very exciting role because I get to do all kinds of things. I can keep my teaching career going at a very high level. I still have opportunities to solo.
Sure.
I still get opportunities from Sphinx. I get local opportunities to solo with symphonies in California and setting up recitals. And
And you get a chance to make a difference.
So, exactly.
You can leave a very big footprint
Exactly.
working
So
with the New West.
my three big things I do now. I'm concertmaster of New West Symphony, which I'm very proud of, and
We'll be playing the Mendelssohn.
and I'm playing concertos and recitals and promoting my CD, and then my sort of daily love and bread and butter is teaching.
Okay, excellent. What was your first association with the Mendelssohn?
Well,
Because every violin, it's passed through the hands of every violinist from its inception. And there are so many models to look up to. I mean, just looking at Heifetz or Isaac Stern, I mean, there's such a great tradition. Which one of those is your holy grail of Mendelssohn playing?
You know what? Well, it's really a collage of so many different ones. The first time I played this concerto was when I learned it when I was 15, and I actually won the Orange County Youth Symphony concerto competition. I was concertmaster of the orchestra. I won the competition when I was 16 and played the first movement of this. It was the first time I ever soloed with orchestra, and it was Mendelssohn. So I have so many.
So he was your first. Was he gentle?
He was He was not
kind?
gentle. It was rough.
Was he your
Sorry, we're getting.
Oh my goodness.
Anyway, no, it was a mixture of being kind of a traumatic experience and then ultimately at the concert a wonderful experience, exhilarating.
Do you
But
have a tape of that by any chance?
oh, you're not going to see it though.
I want to hear that. I want to hear what it sounded
I said I was
like
a late bloomer for a
15
reason.
years ago. I want to see what that.
You know, it was impressive for a 16-year-old, but I certainly hold my students to a higher standard.
So which one is your
Okay,
favorite?
well, I idolized Anne-Sophie Mutter, and I don't know if it was, you know,
The little girl
the
complex,
look,
was that?
the whole look with the
Yeah.
gown, and you know,
Yeah, she's a looker.
and just her confidence that she exuded on stage, you know, almost a masculine power.
But she
to
had
her.
that Swiss Miss sort of thing, like I'm neutral. You know, I mean, she definitely has that. No matter what, again, an earthquake can go on. She's gonna be.
You know what's
there.
amazing? She plays without a shoulder rest, which is not an easy thing to do. Some men, you know, Jascha Heifetz played without a shoulder rest.
That's
He had a
old school.
short little fat neck, you know.
But did
and
she
you just
also
shove the violin in there.
But
I'm
does she also
serious.
have a different bow technique as well? I mean, is she more of the side? Thing
Yeah,
as opposed to,
you know, I think it's more.
she's more like that, which is interesting because the Galamian school and all the Juilliard people, and if you see Perlman, you see all of those, they hold the bow in a very, very specific grip so that they can draw maximum sound evenly. But You look at Heifetz and the old guys.
Heifetz, you know,
it's this thing almost sideways, and they're incredibly.
When young students pick up the violin and hold the bow for the first time, and it usually looks something like this, which just makes me cringe.
Kind of like a baseball bat.
It makes me cringe.
Yeah.
And there's so many issues. You know, you're locked and there's no flexibility. However, you look at Jascha Heifetz, and that's exactly how he plays. But again, it's Heifetz.
That's Heifetz.
And he, somewhere in that locked-looking bow hold of his, he had amazing flexibility and played. He could do anything. But I would never teach a student to play that way. The Galam, as he's talking about, the Galamian bow hold has much more flexibility, and you'll see all my students doing these little exercises, pushing their pinky push-ups.
Is that, what do you call that?
Oh, pinky push-ups, because the pinky with the Heifetz bow hold, your pinky is almost useless. It's like a stiff little, you know, nothing. But with the Galamian bow hold, you really are using the pinky to counter. You know, it's almost like a seesaw.
Counterbalance.
Here I am. Would you like a violin lesson?
No, but it's fascinating. It's fascinating.
But anyway, back to my Mendelssohn experiences. Yeah, so it's come in and out of my life. Since then, I played it with Nashville Symphony about 5 years ago. Actually, I got to play it 3 times, like this weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday concerts. I really love doing that. It's so much more exciting to kind of have a goal of 3 concerts and
how would you
see
say
how
it's evolved? Different. Having done it when you were 16, what have you discovered now, or what do you bring to it now that you say, you know, this is still a challenge, or this
it's still a challenge.
I've finally realized that this transition is special, or that this handling of the musical material, or I love the way he does that. How is there something in it?
The biggest thing I think is that I've learned how to enjoy while I'm playing it, and not. I do all my stressed out practicing in the practice room. I do all the nitty gritty metronome, slow work, vibrato, intonation stuff, and when I get on stage, I try to just think about my sound, and that's something it's taken a long time to be able to do with this piece, because it is so technically difficult and also very exposed. You know, you have a piece like Tchaikovsky Concerto, which is incredibly technically difficult, but you can get away with a little grit in the sound, and there's a little room for error. I don't want to say error, but there is in some degree. This concerto is like, I mean, you're there. It's like Mozart. It's clear and
it's very, very exposed,
very naked, but yet really
naked concert mistress.
No. That extreme. I keep putting myself in these situations, don't I?
Can you play?
I can play, yes. I love to just sit for 20 minutes and then have to play, but
yeah, you're all warmed up, no problem.
But I will play. So we don't have an orchestra here, and we don't have a pianist.
I'm nothing without the orchestra.
But we do have Stephen, and yesterday we had a rehearsal, conducting rehearsal before the concert, and I have to say, he sang the entire orchestra part so beautifully. Maybe he'll accompany me. No, just kidding. I'm going to play a portion of each movement for you today, just a little preview of what's to come this weekend. And nothing is more thrilling to me than standing in front of an orchestra and playing a concerto. It's just about the coolest thing ever. And if you think the sound is great in the audience, I mean, on stage, it's just like a rush and waves.
We definitely have the best seat in the house. I always feel that
I just
steering
love it.
that ship. I'm in the pilot's seat. And it's kind of like being a player manager in a baseball game or something, because I'm right in the action. Composers write for what that sound is. My firsts are there, my cello's there. So I'm getting the best seat in the house, and of course, a soloist, you're right there. So we get to hear the composition.
We're
right in it. These waves of sound come over us, and it's a very, very special feeling, as opposed to being in the audience, where you're slightly more passive and you're taking it in as if you're watching a movie. But when we're actually in it, doing it, there is quite a bit of physicality to the actual sound that's coming up.
And even more special because these are my colleagues that I always play with as concertmaster, and having them there and supporting me and supporting them, it's a feeling like no other. So I will miss having them right now while I play for you, but I'm going to play some of the first movement, which is Mendelssohn marks as, okay, I have to remember the Allegro molto appassionato, which of course means with a lot of passion. And this first movement is stunningly beautiful, opens with a really almost haunted theme that that kind of sets the tone for the movement. And so I'll play a portion from the very beginning for you, and then I'm going to play...
we'll do that one later. So
save it for later?
Yeah, we have 3 different spots, so we'll...
Okay.
We'll get some first movement action now.
Okay.
It's my turn. Then the orchestra comes in and takes it away. That's beautiful.
How many people know this concerto? So are you hearing the orchestra? Because I hear the orchestra when I'm playing. And
of course, you're missing the best part of the show, because when Danielle does this yesterday, this is the first time I've ever seen this. This is great. Because show them your shoes that you're wearing now. See, flash.
Very practical.
But yesterday, even in rehearsal, she had these high heels, these black high heels. I said, no, I have to rehearse with them, because even dealing with the physicality of these heels with her dress is part of the production. So we got the full show yesterday in rehearsal.
The stomping.
The full stomping. Which was beautiful.
Anyway, it was a delight to rehearse with Stephen yesterday for the first time. We've worked together on the Bocelli, but I think only once. And
the pleasure was all mine.
Yeah. Well, yesterday it couldn't have been easier. He's just, first of all, he knows the piece like the back of his hand, and.
Well, my job as a conductor there's 2 ways to approach this. There's the European dictatorial version, which is, this is my concept. I'm the conductor. Follow me. Or you can be a gentleman and you can say, you're the soloist. Let me see how I can make you feel comfortable. And that's usually my take.
I like that way.
Yes. No, because ultimately, the Brahms will come and I'll say what I want to say. I'll push that around, and the Vaughan Williams. But I do, coming from a big opera background, the idea of creating a working environment where everybody feels supported so that they can give their best, as opposed to her trying to convince me how she wants this piece to go. So I spent a lot of time really listening the first time she plays it with the orchestra and trying to figure out where her body language wants to go, what her sense of phrasing is, and then help the orchestra create that mood. Because when we are musical and sensitive, then wonderful things come out for them. So it will truly be Danielle's Mendelssohn from start to beginning. And if she wanted a little faster, if she wanted to take a little time, if the orchestra's too loud there, or she wants to pull back, or whatever it is, it was my pleasure to try and tailor a concerto to bring out the best in the soloist. And that's just my way of trying to make music.
I always look forward to the first rehearsal when I'm a soloist, and I'm excited about it, but I'm also a little bit nervous because, especially if I've never worked with a conductor before, and it was just a piece of cake with you last night. But preparing the preparation that goes into soloing with orchestra, of course, after you've learned the notes, which I learned the notes a long time ago, but there's a term I use a lot. It's called bringing something up to my level, and finding that level for myself. It's like, you have a piece to hear, and it's pretty good, but how to get it to here, that last 3% of preparation is so hard. And so the last couple weeks I've been rehearsing a lot with piano accompaniment. There's, when you have a concerto that's written for solo instrument and an orchestra, obviously I can't carry around my personal orchestra to practice it all the time. So there is a reduced version that's made for the piano, and it's quite beautiful, but nothing like playing with the orchestra. But in many ways, sometimes it's actually harder to play with the piano because the piano
doesn't breathe. A piano is a percussion
Exactly.
instrument. No matter what you say, a piano is a percussion instrument. You hit it, and the sound dies away. But an orchestra doesn't function that way. It functions on a horizontal level. So even the opening, it's this hovering, suspended animation kind of a feel. You feel something that's in the air. It's an attitude. And then the violin rides above it. It's so much easier. The same thing with vocalists, with singers. When they rehearse with a piano, they tend to sing in a vocal way. They tend to actually beat with their voice. And then when they get with orchestra, all of a sudden they realize that there's this carpet of sound.
Yes.
That's just laying out this way. And then they start to sing more that way, and it becomes much more musical, much more human sounding.
Exactly.
So for a violinist, I've noticed, piano soloists obviously have less of a problem, but for a violin soloist or a singer in recital, they're always so thrilled if they take the time, because sometimes they practice so much in the practice room, the piano, that they're waiting for beats to happen, they're waiting to be hit. But people who want to invest themselves in the lyrical and expressive nature with orchestra, all of a sudden things come out, and it becomes such a warm, loving experience as opposed to a competitive, percussive one.
Exactly. And the other thing about a piano is that its pitch does not move. And so adjusting and fine-tuning your intonation to a piano is actually really good practice, because it's
Keeps you down.
much harder. I mean, they plunk a G sharp, and if you're playing a G sharp with them, you have no choice but to adjust. Orchestra is a little more malleable, and I mean, you still have to play perfectly in tune, and it's still very difficult.
Tends to rise a little bit during a concert as they get warmed up, pitched sometimes, and the excitement level tends to rise a little bit, which drives singers up a wall. I remember with Pavarotti, he would come in with a pitch pipe and make sure he got, when the oboe player is tuning, and he'd say, too high. I have to sing a high C. I don't want to sing a high C sharp. Pull it down. And in Vienna, in fact, orchestras tune very, very, very high. It should be 440. Now it's 442. Up in Vienna and over there, they're 443, 444. And they're starting that way. So by the end of the evening, who knows where they're finishing. And if you're a singer, it drives them crazy. But for you also, the adjustment is a continual one.
Yeah. Well, it's always a challenge when preparing. But once I get through that first rehearsal, like last night, I feel really great. Now I'm just excited to play.
Well, the
this
orchestra
weekend.
loves you, so it was easy too. It wasn't as if I had to convince them. I didn't have to cheerlead very much. Everybody wanted to please so much. And that's one of the things that brings me to the next topic that I wanted to discuss, which is the New West Symphony as an organization is such a loving, wonderful group. Because a lot of times you play a piece like Mendelssohn or Brahms, and the major symphony orchestras can sometimes have a bit of a jaded attitude. Been there, done that. So who's going to play the Mendelssohn? I already have my favorite version in my mind. Who's going to conduct the Brahms? Well, I like von Karajan, I like Kleiber, whatever. They've already been down that road so many times that sometimes the basic love and enjoyment of the music disappears a bit. But with this orchestra, whether it was doing a Bocelli concert or this, they're so flexible. A lot of these guys are they're in the film scoring stages all the time. So they do movies, they do soundtracks, they do recording sessions, they teach, they do so many things. But when they assemble to do X amount of subscription concerts a year, to do the great standard repertoire, for them it's still new and fun. So every indication I gave for the Brahms, or even the details that we worked on for Mendelssohn, nobody said, been there, done that. Everybody loved the fact that they were there and wanted to rediscover the piece as if it were the first time they were doing it. So that brings a certain attitude. It smooths the air around in a certain way. There's a certain desire to want to play together. If you have a basketball team and you have 5 superstars on it, it doesn't mean they're going to play well together. And we've seen it. You know, football, how many times you have baseball, you can spend $1 zillion. It doesn't mean that they're going to play together. So as a conductor, immediately from the first moment when I see that, okay, I let them read something, not bad. Now we're going to try and improve it. And when everybody tries to outdo the improvement that I've already given them, that's a great joy. And with this group, from the first moment, as a regional orchestra, they have such tremendous joy and passion for what they do, and they want to succeed so badly that it's a pleasure to be there.
And I think something else that keeps it very fresh at New West Symphony is that we have this unique model where we perform in 3 different venues. So the musicians, it's always exciting because we have to adjust to each hall. Each hall has its own characteristics and
it's not just performance 1, 2, 3.
Right. It's not just come, same place, same place, same place. Which is, that can be wonderful too because you get to know a hall, but I like the challenge of being in different venues and starting in Oxnard and moving closer to my home, which is LA.
Well, the great arts shouldn't be an elitist organization, and you shouldn't have to drive 2 hours to see it or whatever. We as people want to be more three-dimensional than we're usually given credit for. So it's fun to go to a baseball game, it's fun to go to a movie, it's fun to go to the opera, but it's nice to go to the symphony. So it's nice to have a variety of entertainment, and let's face it, we're in the entertainment business. We can't say just because we're doing Brahms that if the audience doesn't get it, it's their fault. And that's the pervasive attitude usually with European music is that if you don't get it, there's something wrong with you. And I never subscribe to that. It's my job, it's our job to present, to advocate for the composer so convincingly that whether you've studied it or haven't studied it, whether you're hearing it for the first time or the 5th time, you go, I'm so glad to be here. This is where I want to be for that hour and a half. And these guys make that possible.
And speaking of this eclectic background, you yourself have a very eclectic background musically, and I'm very interested in the fact that you're also a composer. Could you talk about?
Well, I believe it all comes from understanding the score from the inside out. And when I asked you your role model, mine was easy. It was Leonard Bernstein. To me, as an American musical role model, it starts and ends there. The 1960s young people's concerts are still the model for how you can educate without pandering. He spoke to kids and adults in a way that invited them in. It was as if it was his living room. It wasn't, you didn't go to a concert. It was Lenny's show. You were coming to a show and he invited you and he told you why. This is great and this is why and you're going to love it. And then did it, then backed it up. Rather than just sort of dictating a policy of non-inclusion. So I've always been for that. And Lenny was very, very, as a teacher, and I was his assistant for a while, he was inclusive in that I was a young Juilliard student, we're talking 1980, and I would show up at a Philharmonic rehearsal or something, Mr. Bernstein. He's the composer of West Side Story and this, that, and the other thing. And I said, can I come to rehearsal? You have a score? Yeah, you can come. It was as simple as that. Any sincere effort to be around the music was applauded by him. And so what more can you ask for? So I was around, proved my worth, and eventually assisted for him. But he was always open to conversations about the music. And it wasn't something that was beyond discussion. It was like, this transition to me always baffled me. Or, isn't it great how this harmony did this? Or, this orchestration is wonderful. It was an endless source of curiosities that sparked the imagination. at whatever age. As long as you're curious, you're alive. You think, in any topic, once you think that there's nothing else to learn or nothing else sparks your fantasy, then you're no longer functioning. And he was endlessly curious, and he loved the curiosity of others around him. He sort of fed off it. I have a very odd story. You want to hear an odd story? No, this is a Lenny story. Because he would hold court, I don't know if you know it, at the end of a concert. This one was particular. It was 1980, so he was doing a Copland 80th birthday retrospective at Avery Fisher Hall. So I went backstage, like everybody does. You do diligence, and you just want to be around the guy. He was so charismatic. And everybody was there, including Perlman would stop by. Everybody who was in town would stop by to pay homage to Lenny. And so he would hold court in the green room, and there were easily 35, 40 people there. And I said, he insisted that you call him Lenny. It was never Mr. Bernstein. And if you call him Mr. Bernstein, I'm Lenny. Smoking a cigarette, drinking a scotch. The music, it's so beautiful. Isn't that beautiful? And they played it. Smoking and drinking. In the green room, no smoke. He didn't care. The rules were for everybody else but Lenny. So everybody's, basically telling him how great everything was. And then I said, I saw you at Tristan the other night. Because the Met had done, it was Levine's first series of Tristan, these oldest, and I went to all of them, of course, and I said, I saw you there the other night, but you left at the end of Act 1. There's silence. Nobody wants to say anything. I thought they were horrible. I just recorded Tristan. I did Act 1 2 months ago in Berlin, and that's how it goes. He says, I said, I just went to 4 of them. And he said, why would you do that? Why don't you stay home and listen to, Furt Wangler recording, or listen to this or that? He says, I didn't think they were very good at all, and the soprano wasn't good, and the tenor wasn't good. And I was 26, so I was a bit naive, and I thought that maybe being intelligent would, capture his imagination. So I said, Leonard Bernstein, would tell a young student that a recording, no matter how good it is more valuable than hearing the opening, when you hear the cellos go, da, ya, di, and then the Tristan chord, wa, da, di, da, and then the string, the second violins cross over, and the viola, the prelude and the Liebestod alone is enough to go, and then the Liebesnacht in Act 2, and I go on and on. And I said, no, I'd take the worst live performance over any recording at all. I said, I study the score in the day, and then I hear the reality at night. Silence. I see 45 people in the room, and they're going. They're backing away. It's like the Red Sea is parted. Everybody, no one wants to be associated with me. They're backing up. And now he's got to outdo me. And this is classic Lenny. Silence. Mercurio, how old? 26. Pow! Gives me a smack across the face. And everybody goes just like that. And then he grabs me, boom, and hugs me and kisses me. And he goes, you're too wise to be 26. You're too wise. And everybody was like... But he was so dramatic. From that point on, and I was sure that was 1980, from that point on, he never said no. Never said no. If I was there, he was always gracious. So that's a role model, something that I aspire to, both in generosity, but also as a composer, music from the inside out. Ultimately, I went to Juilliard as a composer, not as a conductor. And my knowledge of music as a composer, and all my friends are composers, whether it's John Corigliano, David Del Tredici, and I worked for many years with Menotti, Giancarlo Menotti, in the Spoleto Festival, 3 years. Being in touch with living music gives me more insight or more questions about how a day composer, what were they thinking when they wrote the damn thing? Because it didn't just fall out of the sky. There were a lot of choices that were being made. And I was always taught and encouraged to look at it as if it were written yesterday. Whereas I find that some of my colleagues who are only conducting students, and this was backed up in my conversations with Lenny and Lucas Foss, the people who approach music as a recreative artist, purely, okay, Brahms, then they get caught up in how fast it is, or how slow it is, or how loud it is, or how soft it is. because that to them is part of the creative process. Whereas if you live in the creative process zone and you stay with people who are endlessly creative, then that's not the most important thing. It's what is the character saying at this point? What's the story I'm trying to tell? Why is that dissonance there? That is a weird orchestration. Either I'm going to cover up that it's weird or I'm going to highlight that it's weird. Let me investigate further. So the role model for great conductors, in my opinion, have always come, hope I didn't hit that.
I did the same thing.
Has always come from the composer-conductor. Whether it was Toscanini was a bad composer, but his friends were all great composers. Puccini was his friend, Catalani, Respighi, and the amount of pieces that he did world premieres of were unbelievable. He lived music new as part of his life. So, now, round two, what are you going to show us? Something from the second movement?
Yeah, well, how about if I play some of that cadenza, too, though?
First act
I would love
cadenza,
for you to hear the cadenza.
which was a written cadenza, by the way.
Yes.
As opposed to a lot of the Mozart, the earlier classical tradition where you'd arrive at the dominant and then somebody would invent, and some people had written out. But the Mendelssohn cadenza is actually a very, very precisely written out cadenza.
It is, and the cadenza is the moment when the orchestra stops playing. They get to a very exciting moment, usually a big chord, and then the violinist takes over and kind of shows off virtuosity and all kinds of violin techniques. And you'll hear trills. A trill is when two notes go back and forth. You'll hear a bowing technique called sautier and ricochet, where the bow jumps off the string. So this is the cadenza from the first movement.
The end of the cadenza is fascinating because it doesn't really finish. At the end of the cadenza just sort of filters in and the orchestra rejoins. It's a seamless connection between cadenza and
It's
the
really
recapitulation.
magical.
You know, when I hear that by itself, it reminds me of how Mendelssohn was such a big proponent of Bach. He was the rediscoverer in the 1840s and the 1850s because Bach had sort of been forgotten, believe it or not. And there wasn't a critical edition. You couldn't buy the works, the complete works of Bach. And he was responsible personally. When I hear that, it reminds me so much of the solo sonatas as a cadenza. As a cadenza, it isn't really a romantic cadenza. It's much more of a cadenza that's looking back at modernizing Bach for its time.
Right.
It's very, very much like that.
It's almost reminiscent of like the chaconne. You know, with all these double stops and full chords and
Yeah.
dance mode, slow
Exactly.
dance motives.
But even some of the arpeggiation
yes.
figures of that was classic Bach solo sonata kind of things, modernized by Mendelssohn, seen through the eyes of Mendelssohn, but with this great love and affection for Bach.
Something that always kind of boggles my mind is that this violin that I play on was...
That box, whatever it is.
the box, was around during the time that
Yes, that one's got a great pedigree, doesn't it?
It does. It was also during, I mean, this violin existed when Bach was around. It's crazy. This violin was made in 1709. I believe Bach died in 1750, right? And
He lived a long time.
He did, 1685.
Yeah, that's a
1750.
long time.
And
A lot of children to make.
this violin was made in Italy by Alessandro Galliano, 1709, as I
Paisan,
said.
he's an old friend of mine.
Yeah. You know, Stephen
He's from Jersey,
speaks Italian.
I think. Hey, Galliano from Jersey.
And I'm so lucky to have this violin. It's on loan to me from a foundation, the Mandel Collection of Southern California. Peter and Sarah Mandel, they have just a wonderful foundation. And Mr. Lipset, Robert Lipset, is kind of their advisor. And
Well, he advised
some
them well.
of him, I'm glad
Luckily for us.
I'm glad he's a friend of mine. And so I actually got this violin when I played the Brook Violin Concerto with the USC Symphonies. Carl St. Clair is conducting. I won the competition at USC, and I got this violin like 2 weeks before that concert. It became available, and Mr. Lipset said, start practicing on this violin. You're going to play on it in 2 weeks.
Good.
And since then, it's been my sort of partner. And
How's your husband feel about that?
he'll pick it up sometimes and noodle on it a little bit. And yeah, it's just, it's magnificent. I also have my own violin that's a Romeo Antoniazzi. I think it's 1902. And I actually loaned that violin to a student of mine who's a very serious young violinist. So these violins are not really affordable for regular musicians. So thank God we have people loaning them out in foundations.
Yep.
And yeah.
Can we take some questions? I believe some of them were written out.
I'll
We're
make
going to
you.
get Natalia to come out. Oh, this is for me. And
Oh, great. I love questions.
you want to go first? Ladies first?
Sure. Okay. Okay. Should I say who it's from? From Alda. What can a concertmaster do if you hear someone who is a little off key? Do you give the person a signal? And I think this reminds me of a funny story. I think I would take their bow and maybe rub some oil on it so it doesn't make any sound. I had a no, I'm totally kidding, but only half kidding, because I have a teacher that actually did that. When I was in middle school, I had a band teacher that would, an orchestra teacher, he conducted band also, who really wanted our orchestra to be the best. And, you know, this is a public middle school. Most of the kids are not very serious, and many of them were just scratching and screeching. It was just god-awful. And he said, come up and I'll give you this special rosin, you know, because rosin, we put rosin on our bow to give it a little more grip. It's like tree sap, and it helps the sound to speak louder. So this rosin he was giving them was actually oil. And so he was slicking up their bows. So these poor kids are back there playing their little hearts out.
No sounds coming
out. So anyway, maybe that would be my... No, you know... What do I actually do if some... I mean, we have such wonderful players in New West Symphony. But if there ever was a problem, you know, I would talk to someone personally, I suppose. But you know, when you're playing in a section, it's sometimes, hopefully you're not hearing individuals play. I mean, that's the whole point of a section, is that you're playing together, perfectly together. Nobody's sticking out more than another. It's almost the polar opposite of what I'm doing this weekend, which my goal is to stick out because I'm the soloist, and so my goal is to play in a way
in the
that is
orchestra
separate.
is to get a whole first violin section to sound like one instrument, one big first violin. The whole second section to sound like one big violin. And then you bring those sections together and they sound like one string section.
And what's so amazing and amazingly difficult about that is that all of our wonderful string players, we come from very different backgrounds, very different schools of teaching. We talked about this bowhold thing with the Galamian bowhold, and many players come from a very different school of thought that can be equally successful. And so kind of trying to find the common ground and the common sound is the job of the concertmaster, but the music director, of course, dictates.
That's a big
that
challenge.
sound.
That's a big challenge.
It is. If everyone, studied with it's funny, at the Colburn School, the entire string section studies with Bob Lipset. So the sound is very homogeneous. Yes. It's very.
Well, the Chicago Symphony, like the horn section was famous because it was Dale Clevenger, and they all played the same instrument. So you have 4 horns or 6 horns, and they're playing the same model of the same instrument because they want to blend. They want their overtones to vibrate together. So it can be taken to extreme levels of this is how we play.
Right. But the New West Symphony musicians are very adaptable, and like Stephen said, they're doing all kinds of things from movie, film recording, and playing in the opera orchestra, and blending is sort of our job. And so anyway, hopefully I don't hear anyone sticking out off key. But
Well, I'll answer one quickly here from Paul. Take a bow. What's it like coming to conduct a performance with a group of musicians that you've only met several days before the concert? A challenge, but it's a good one. I think it's fun. For me, conducting is like being in a big sandbox, and you're throwing around a bunch of sand. And it's the very fact that I don't know them can be a challenge. So that can take 5 or 10 minutes to get to know. But with the amount of experience I have now, I can usually size up things quickly. And then it's just a question of how to make it better. It's just different. It's different. Honestly, at this point in my career, I'd rather do more things in fewer places because I've been around the block a few times. And it's fun as a younger man, as a younger conductor in your 20s, 30s, and even early 40s. It's fun to go to Prague for the first time. It's fun to go to Vienna for the first time. It's fun to conduct every orchestra in Italy you can imagine because you learn what the stylistic tendencies are. And they're very, very different. The English orchestras in London play a very, very, very English way. And the Italian orchestras are totally unprepared, messy. You've got to teach them the piece from the first one. But by the time they get to the concert, they're the most expressive instrument because they're naturally a mess. So when you can organize it, but then they get in there, and emotionally, they are so far beyond the emotional giving nature of how to make music. Whereas I did a Traviata in Bonn, in Germany, when I could not get this orchestra to want to play expressively. They wanted to be correct. Just be correct. I started out, and we had the Traviata prelude, boom, 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 and you had and it's went, it was all in tune, it was all correct, and these guys were immovable. So every orchestra has a personality, every nationality has its strengths and weaknesses. So having done that for a long period of time, it's for me now, I enjoy more coming back to the same place, more and more, where, for example, I've done in Detroit, with the Detroit Opera, I've done for the last 17 years, I think I've done 25 operas or 26 operas. And when I sit with them, within 3.5 seconds, it's like, hey, you know everybody by name. I know their strengths and weaknesses. You're going to drag, you're going to do this, you're going to do that. This person's going to prepare, that person's not going to prepare. And we go freely. In this orchestra, fortunately, I've had some experience with a lot of these people, so the learning curve or the adjustment curve was virtually non-existent. And their willingness made it instantaneous. So, what have you got for us for the final offering?
Yeah, well, this whole impassioned concerto fires up, it leads to a beautiful second movement, which leads to a fiery last movement. And I'm going to play a little bit of the last movement for you.
A little fire.
And every time I play this last movement with an orchestra, I always regret that I did it too slow. So,
So now, okay, now
so my goal this weekend is to really play this.
This is quick. This is a quick last movement.